And welcome to WPFW Washington, your Jazz and Justice Radio, entering 89.3 FM. I'm your host, David Whettstone, and I'm welcoming you, the listener, to a very, very special week. We're in the last week of our Winter Fund Drive. Sunday past was a special occasion. The station had its 44th birthday, so we're now in year 45 due to listeners like yourselves choosing to support this Pacifica station that brings you jazz and justice. This morning, my guest is Dr. P. Gabrielle Foreman. Dr. Foreman is the Paterno Chair of Liberal Arts and Professor of English, African American Studies, History at Penn State University. Importantly, she's also the co-director of the Center for Black Digital Research and a founding director of the Colored Conventions Project. It's the Colored Conventions Project that we're going to talk about today. And if Dr. Foreman is with us on the line, I would just ask you to hold on for a second. I've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. The goal for WPFW is to raise $350,000 each quarter. We do that because we need to pay the electric bills, support a staff of 10 people, and each program has a particular goal. My goal is $500. I want to thank the people who helped us last week to exceed that goal. We exceeded it mightily, and we have a number of people, an anonymous donor from Denver, Colorado, a donor from White Plains, Maryland, a donor from Washington, D.C. You know who you are, and I thank you for putting us way over the goal last week. $500, and to meet that goal, you can become a member today by calling 202-588-9739, 202-588-9739, or 800-222-9739. So this morning, we're going to take a look at a very, very important legacy that's left to us from the 19th century. Our show is entitled Meeting Together, Colored Conventions, the Early Start of Black-Led Organizing and Activism. Our guest, as I said earlier, is Dr. P. Gabrielle Foreman. Again, she is the Paterno Chair of Liberal Arts and the Professor of English and African American Studies and History at the Pennsylvania State University. She's the co-director of the Center for Black Digital Research and the founding director of the Colored Conventions Project. Her books include Activist Sentiments, Reading Black Women in the 19th Century, and the Colored Conventions Movement, Black Organizing in the 19th Century. Dr. Foreman, welcome, and I'm sorry for the delay and a little bit of technical difficulties here.
It's such a pleasure to be here, and technical difficulties are a part of technical life.
Well, one technical difficulties we're going to get rid of right now is me being tongue-tied. So let me ask you first, how are you doing during this pandemic? And we're going to lift up an important aspect of your work in a few moments, but how's that work been affected by the pandemic?
I think I'm in perpetual mourning, and I join that with so many of our people, of Black people, Indigenous people, Pacific Islanders, and Latinx folks who have died at really, really high rates, and people who have been impacted by the deaths of their family members and their friends. And I think when we think about our communities and we move from individual deaths to the collective impact of losing so many people, we get a much different sense of the mourning and sadness, a different kind of medical discrepancy, nadir, that is impacting our community. So I join those people. Our work, because we're a digital center, it still has been impacted. We've been able to meet. We have the kind of technological infrastructure, et cetera. At coloredconventions.org, we continue to do our work. But we need each other as people to connect in order to be whole and full, and so we we miss seeing each other. So it's good to be here in this community, this audio community today.
And again, I thank you for being with us. I know a lot of our audience is asking, what in the world is he talking about, colored conventions? Why does he talk about the 19th century every so often, and particularly about Reconstruction? So first things first, the Center for Black Digital Research, as I understand it, is a very collaborative effort. Again, it's a digital research center, which means that people are accessing you online. It engages both the public and scholarly audiences, and it's community-based research. Like our station, we're community-based. And I know you have 3 projects that you'll quickly tell us about, but it is an amazing thing that you're doing in the digital world, especially with the constrictions now of the pandemic. You're trying to support grassroots organizations, cultural institutions, what they call in academic circles, the GLAM professions, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. Can you tell us, again, a little bit about the center?
Sure. The Center for Black Digital Research is housed at Penn State University. We call it DigBlack or Dig Black, right? So we're really invested in digitizing Black records, digging Black history, excavating those Black records, digitizing them, and loving Black people, Black history, and the preceding minutes records that we've left behind. So we tend to call it DigBlack or Dig Black, the other name for the Center for Black Digital Research. And we have 3 projects. One is the Colored Convention Project, which you can find at coloredconventions.org, which brings 7 decades of 19th century Black organizing to digital life. We have records and exhibits that are emerging from the book that is just being published called the Colored Conventions Project, Black Organizing in the 19th Century, which is the first full-length book to examine the Black convention movement in more than half a decade. And really rivals and exceeds by 30 years the antebellum anti-slavery movement, which we'll talk about in a minute. The second project at the Center for Black Digital Research, DigBlack, is Douglas Day, which was started by Mary Church Terrell, but it was resurrected, and we celebrated on Frederick Douglass's chosen birthday, which is February 14th, as a day of collective love for Black history. So every year we throw a global transcribe-a-thon and day of education, which people all over the globe join in order to look at and transcribe Black records. We transcribed Anna Julia Cooper's papers last year, Mary Church Terrell's papers. We're talking about the giants of African American thought at the beginning of these movements, and we actually get to bring their scattered records to life so everybody can access them. So again, this is collaborative research, collaborative work, and again, a collective love for Black history and Black historical records. And our third project is the Early Black Women's Organizing Archive, which we're just getting off the ground, which again brings the scattered records of Black women thinkers, intellectuals, and organizers who collectively labored for suffrage and for labor justice, for education, and from freedom from white mob violence. And we try to reflect in our principles and practices a sense of the labor justice and emphasis on collective work and credit that the movements that we study actually bring. So I just want to highlight the fact that we pay our undergraduate researchers $15 an hour. We're honoring the struggle that all of us are engaged in for a $15 an hour base. And our graduate students make a living wage with moving costs and professional development costs. So we're really trying to intervene to make the university a place that produces not only Black education and excellence, but also Black wealth, or at least freedom from indebtedness, acknowledging that the net worth of a typical white family is nearly 10 times greater than that of a Black family, and that Black and Latinx families are twice as likely to have no wealth, no assets or savings or housing wealth than white families are. So we're really seeking to address these issues of labor justice while we're also resurrecting Black histories that struggled for economic justice.
Well, speaking of the struggle of justice, a lot of people educated in this country have never heard of colored conventions.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are many events that lead up to it. One that your book emphasizes is a violent white mob tries to rid themselves of their black co-residents in the city of Cincinnati in 1829. And it's that wave of anti-black violence that is occurring even before the Civil War that is a rallying cry for black folk to get organized. So please do tell us, what are colored conventions? How did they start? And we'll take it from there.
Well, David, you did such a great job of introducing exactly how they began. Like the NAACP, which begins in response to white mob violence in central Illinois, the convention movement also begins in response to white mob violence. 2,000 members of black families were forced out of Cincinnati to Canada. We so often think of, or have been taught to think of, the South as the locus of serious violence against enslaved and black populations, families, and communities. But the Midwest, and we should also note that Cincinnati was called the Queen of the West at that point. It was the West Coast in the expanding United States. Also had a lot of black exclusionary laws. Black people could only vote in, and I should say black men could only vote in 5 of all of the free states. So by the time of the Civil War. So when this violence, these mobs go attack black families, the convention movement begins in Philadelphia in the last year of Bishop Richard Allen's life at Mother Bethel, the most important AME church, right, the inaugural black church, AME church in the United States. And they convene people from all over the region, from 7 states of the free states. That's quite a lot. And they begin to start to talk about issues of economic justice, of educational access, of freedom from state-sanctioned violence, and voting rights and political rights. And this continues for another 70 years. It launches a movement. We call it the meeting that started the movement, that takes place in state conventions, black conventions, and in national conventions, where thousands upon thousands of people participated, tens of thousands of people participated, and tens of thousands of people participated as delegates as well.
And they participated far and wide, and in this world of violence, they were brave enough to travel. But the important thing is to get a beginning of an understanding, because so often antebellum, that's pre-Civil War efforts to abolish slavery, are emphasized. The Underground Railroad is emphasized, and it's emphasized in such a way, to be quite frank, put the focus on white agency or interracial relationships. And there's nothing wrong with either of those two things, but recognizing colored conventions recenters the historical work that's necessary. It puts the focus on black exchange, mentorship, and development. And your digital project models, we've said it earlier, it models a more collective effort. What are some of the things we begin to discover once we delve into the world of colored conventions?
So I want to note what you just said, is that these conventions took place all over the growing United States, from California to Florida to upstate New York to Maine to Arkansas to Indiana. I mean, we're talking about literally all over. And then into North America, there were conventions in Canada as well, as so many black people, enslaved and free, left the United States in the 1850s as we saw the constriction of black civil rights, black voting rights, and black property rights, for example, in the 1850s for free black people as well. So you see these conventions happening, and they're multi-day meetings. I want to underscore what you said, too, is that Black people were in conversation with each other. They were taking statistical records in order to chart the contributions, the wealth, the intellectual capital, the newspapers, the societies that we were organizing on our own. They, of course, were in conversation with whites and white allies, but we have a tendency in this country, as you pointed out, to really emphasize narratives of white heroism helping Black people. But the convention movement actually starts 3 years before William Lloyd Garrison starts the American Anti-Slavery Society. And our Black newspapers like Freedom's Journal predate William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator, the most important anti-slavery newspaper. We need to think about the ways in which the conventions show us how Black people led, not followed, how we organized and were agents of our own infrastructure building and freedom movements. And these are the same issues that organize our own activism today. So when we organize and we think about anti-slavery, we tell a trajectory story which ends in freedom, oftentimes in the public mind, right? Quakers and white abolitionists came together to, quote-unquote, help us be free, and that ends in 1865. But this convention movement even gets larger after the Civil War and the anti-slavery movement folds, where 4 million enslaved Black people become free and join in huge conventions, again, multi-day meetings, to start organizing for Black schools, for Black freedom of travel, for Black voting. And they take their place in state legislatures as well as people who were both recently freed and also people who had significant training by going to scores and scores of these meetings. Frederick Douglass starts in 1843. His last convention is in 1883. That's 40 years of being in conversation with Black folks. But when the last biography of him came out last year and won multiple awards, it's a wonderful book by David Blight, the New York Times wrote about his white influencers. They named the people who most influenced him and named Abraham Lincoln, William Lloyd Garrison, Julia Griffith, right? And did not name the Black circuit of exchange that he was in, influenced Charles Riemann and James Pennington, right? The kinds of people who influenced him over years. These are the giants of Black intellectual history, of Black organizing history, gathering together in one place and then in another and in another over decades. It's quite amazing that it's been practically erased from public memory.
And Dr. Foreman, again, thank you for being with us. Allow me to reintroduce you. We're talking to Dr. Gabrielle Foreman. She is the Paterno Chair of Liberal Arts, Professor of English, African American Studies, and History at Penn State University. And we're talking about colored conventions. I have museums on the brain, Doctor. And the colored conventions is a phenomenon of the 19th century that brings us a legacy today. It models collective action, and that's what we do here at WPFW. So if I may, I want to recognize that we are indeed in a winter fund drive. Winter is closing up. Spring is right ahead of us. But we don't move from season to season without collective actions. And your support as a listener brings you this show free of corporate sponsorship or any undue influences by calling 202-588-9739 or 800-222-9739. You understand that collectively we exist, we strive, and we thrive together. When our listeners contribute, they are precisely doing that. They are allowing us to inform each other, to enlighten each other, to educate, to inspire, to empower. We need your support. The numbers to call are 202-588-9739, 202-588-9739, 800-222-9739. One of the things we try to do here at WPFW is to make sure that you are indeed safe, and to make that clear, we have my colleague in the news department, Chris Bangor-Drowns, Chris, I just started rolling on a pitch. Give me some strength here. Direct people to how we can keep them safe. We've got a hoodie and we've got a face mask. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, that's right. So we have plenty of gifts for you this pledge drive, a bunch of hoodies and some masks for just a single donation of $89.30 or a monthly donation of about $7.50 a month. You can get a hoodie, a WPFW hoodie to celebrate our 44 years in business or in non-commercial business here in radio. And look, we're talking about colored conventions, and I think this was kind of mentioned by Dr. Foreman here. What we do at WPFW is a convention in itself. It's a convention on the air, and we do need your support to continue these conventions. And in return for your support, we do have these gifts. And so if you call 202-588-9739 or 800-222-9739, you can grab one of these hoodies, many sizes available, for a single donation of $89.30 or a monthly donation of $7.50. We also have this WPFW Jazz and Justice face mask, as well as a Black Lives Matter face mask. The WPFW one is just a $40 donation, and the Black Lives Matter mask costs $50, and we split that donation with the movement. Which I think really, again, gets at the fact that this is a movement space comparable to the colored conventions that we've been discussing this hour. And we do need your support to continue operating this space in this crucial time. Again, the number to call is 202-588-9739. If you're out of area, 1-800-222-9739, or anywhere in the world, go online, WPFW-FM.org.
Well, thank you, Chris, and we have a lot to still get into with this hour. One of the things before we proceed is I want to thank Tracy and Bowie. She's gotten the ball rolling. We are now down into the $400 mark. And again, listeners, become a member today. A small contribution by sustaining the station monthly makes a big, big difference. It really does keep things going. We reach a lot of people in the DMV metropolitan area, but we're also online. Many of the programmers put their shows on social media platforms and are available by podcast. You can donate if you're using that kind of technology with Cash App. All you have to do is $sign WPFW, designate the show you want to support, and we'll be on our way. Dr. Foreman, thank you for being with us this morning. You have mentioned a lot of things that have gone on in a period starting from the 1830s into the 1890s, and you've mentioned some prominent men like Frederick Douglass. But I would be remiss if we didn't lift up at least three women: Frances E.W. Harper, Mary Ann Shadd Cary, and Charlotte Ray. These are very important women who contributed to not only their immediate black community, but to black communities across the nation.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I really want to talk about Frances Harper and Mary Ann Shadd Cary and Charlotte Ray. And let me start by talking about Mary Ann Shadd Cary, and then I want to just sort of link to the fundraising drive that is going on at 202-588-9739. And the infrastructure that is necessary for black collectives that are in the media to gather and to extend struggles for justice. So Mary Ann Shadd Cary was the first African-American woman in North America to edit a newspaper on her own. And she also was the first black woman to enroll in law school at Howard. She is the child of conventions. Her father, Abraham Shadd, went to five of the first six conventions and was a leader there. And she herself was a delegate to the 1855 convention in Philadelphia and participated with almost all of the leaders who moved to Canada. We're actually having a symposium. The Center for Black Digital Research is having a symposium on her on next October, and then for Douglass Day on the 200th anniversary of her birth, we will be transcribing her records as well. But I want to talk about before I get to Frances Harper and Charlotte Ray, I want to talk a little bit about the ways in which media, like KPFA, I'm from Los Angeles, KPFW, really is important in the ways in which these movements were extended. So conversations about Black organizing and about the convention movement happen both before the meetings themselves and afterwards, and they extend the reach and the audience of the people who are at the conventions. There are debates going on about what should be addressed at the conventions before the conventions take place. And then again, after the convention, the proceedings themselves were often printed in Black newspapers. This becomes particularly important because everybody didn't have enough money or enough time to get to the convention. So public media, right, Black papers, progressive media becomes a central place for people to convene to discuss the important ideas and to do further organizing.
And we should make sure they're orientated to the East Coast here, WPFW.
Yes, I said that twice. I'm sorry about that.
No hating on the West Coast, but I just wanted to make that clear.
No, I'm sorry. I'm from the West Coast originally. Charlotte Ray's family is also from a Black media family, and she is also engaged in the convention movement. Frances Harper is the most important Black poet, author, and one of the most important Black organizers of the 19th century. She's the most popular poet before Paul Laurence Dunbar of Black poets, early Black poets, besides Phyllis Wheatley, so of the 19th century itself. And she's the first Black woman to go ahead.
Yeah, and very much like the poet that we were treated to during the inauguration. A very tall, very beautiful woman, but a woman that was recognized for her talents. So I just wanted to add that in. If listeners heard us talking about the three, Charlotte Ray is important because she's recognized as probably the first practicing Black woman lawyer in the United States. So they all had public lives.
She goes to school with Marianne Shag Carey. They actually room together as they're also organizing for suffrage in Washington, D.C. As well.
So
they come from a convention
Doctor,
culture,
forgive me.
Right? They really come from a convention culture. Oh, no, my apologies. They come from this convention culture, and this is important to recognize because women are officially excluded from, are so often excluded from the movement minutes. Very rarely are they delegates. Frances Harper is a speaker. Marianne Shag Carey is a speaker and a delegate. But you see them involved in infrastructure building, in the hosting, and the housing, and the fundraising, and the organizing, and the thinking behind the conventions and behind the convention speeches as well. Julia Garnett, the wife of Henry Highland Garnett, who gives that extraordinary speech in the 1843 convention called the Address to the Slaves, which some people know it's short and extraordinarily powerful. It's online freely. And they give it there, and he credits her for co-writing this speech.
So, again, you mentioned a couple of very interesting things. The official minutes of these meetings and color conventions were attended by hundreds and thousands of people, hundreds and thousands, high hundreds, sometimes in meeting halls, like you mentioned the first initial meeting at Mother Bethel in Philadelphia. If I'm not mistaken, that had a capacity to hold well into 1,000 people. And these meetings are going on decade after decade. And these minutes from the meetings, the reports from the meetings are shared so people know what Black folk are debating. And they're talking about education, fair wages, a right to lay one's head in a home and be safe, the judicial system, being on juries, having the vote. All these things are covered. How is it that how can I put it, that you and your research project begin to recognize what's happening outside of the meetings? You mentioned the traveling, the boarding houses. And, a younger generation may look back on this period and talk about respectability and the politics thereof. Yet, again, I want to give you a chance to emphasize black women participants really redefined this.
That's such a great question. The Color Conventions Movement, Black Organizing in the 19th Century, the book that is just coming out, has a variety of essays in it, and we really wanted to make sure that all of the essays included black women's contribution that had been hidden from the official records. So a fabulous scholar who is actually in your area at University of Maryland, Psyche Williams-Forson, writes an essay about black boarding houses. She asks, where did they stay and what did they eat? And this is a great question because in the 1890s, for example, at Henry McNeill Turner's convention, which they called Turner's Convention, there were 500 delegates. And those delegates came from all over, and the newspaper articles on this convention where he calls for reparations as well, there are 500 delegates. Where did they stay, right? When people are coming to these small towns, where did they stay? So Dr. Williams-Forson goes and looks for ads, like a contemporary Airbnb ads in black newspapers, and finds them. Finds ads for meetings and boarding houses for you to come to when you're coming to black conventions. They actually send in thank you notes to some of the hosts, like Amelia Shadd, and they name the black women who are actually hosting people at conventions. Now, all of us know that when we go to meetings, half the planning happens around the meals. Do you know this, David?
Yes, and all these side meetings are going on, too.
All the strategic meetings, right? All the planning meetings. So let's think about the infrastructure it takes to feed that many people. We have these breaks in the convention proceedings, all of which you can find at coloredconventions.org. You have these breaks in the conventions that says goes to, that everybody comes back after a meal. Well, where they are eating is also the infrastructure built by black women, and the fundraising to feed them is also happening by black women. We all know that fundraising is a power position, unless right women are doing it. So I think we need to figure out and recognize that black women, again, we're building the infrastructure to allow these meetings to occur. And that's one of the contributions that we see. And what is left after the conventions happen, right, is the organizing structure that allows them to take place.
Again, we're speaking to Dr. Gabrielle Foreman. Dr. Foreman is demonstrating her expertise in 19th century American, particularly black history. And we're talking about colored conventions, and we're doing that at Community Watch and Comment, the Wednesday edition, because your host, yours truly, believes that history leaves us with a rich, rich legacy. It's treasure. It's an affirmation of you, the listener, in your community, because often your predecessors, your ancestors, something we honor here at WPFW, have done the work. It is no accident that you're here listening right now. It is no accident that whatever state you're in, whatever means you are in, your very survival has been dependent upon things like colored conventions that Dr. Foreman is so aptly describing. We know that you value the content that over 100 programmers offer you. Won't you become a listener today? Take up this opportunity, as Dr. Foreman has talked about, of being supportive infrastructure. When we talk about her Center for Black Digital Research, I want you to know that librarians, elders, community leaders, churches, sororities, seventh graders, all sorts of people have contributed to that effort. It's a similar effort that we try to do here at WPFW. Won't you become a member today by calling 202-588-9739, 202-588-9739, 800-222-9739, 800-222-9739. Two numbers are available to you. Let's bring that goal into place. Let's even exceed it. We need your help now. And we have many ways to empower you. Chris Bangage-Rounds will tell us how.
Yeah, we have many ways here. So again, if you enjoy the content, if you learn from, and if your soul feeds off the content of WPFW, we need your support. But with your support, we can offer you even more content. We have, in addition to the many hoodies and masks that we offer, we also have
historical records.
Exactly.
Yes.
4 different sets of historical records compiled by the Pacifica Radio Archives. One of these is the Malcolm X collection on MP3, which features 8 hours of audio from iconic speeches like Ballot or the Bullet, Black Muslims versus the Sit-ins, Prospects for Freedom, etc. For a donation of $100, you can get that 8 hours of Malcolm X on MP3, or a monthly donation of just $8.33. We also have a 6 CD set just focused on the Black Panther Party, hearing from Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, H. Rap Brown, and many, many others. That's for a donation of $180, or a monthly sustaining donation of just $15. And we have 2 others from PRA, both for a donation of $200. One is a Black History Month study guide flash drive, and another is Voices Who Changed the World. And so we have a wide variety of intellectual and historical resources here for you to expand on the great program that we already provide. And so if you're interested in that, or simply interested in supporting the great work that the station does and the great work that David Whettstone does every single week on this show, please call 202-588-9739. That's 202-588-9739. If you're out of area, 800-222-9739. That's 800-222-9739. If you're hip and got a smartphone, go on to Cash App. You can find us at $WPFW, or anywhere in the world, head online, WPFW-FM.org. There's a big red Donate Now button. You can go ahead and click that to donate securely online. And I'd like to stress again, David, that, some of these numbers I threw out for some of the disc sets and stuff, $200 might sound big. If you give a monthly donation, it's not only more effective for you, but it means that we can plan ahead. We know what revenue we'll be generating each month over the course of this next year. So if you want one of these flash drives or CD sets, you don't have to give the $100 or $200 in one setting. You can give $15 a month. You can give $17 a month. And that really matters for us too, because we can plan ahead from that. So again, the number to call, 202-588-9739, out of area, 800-222-9739, or anywhere in the world, WPFW-FM.org.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Foreman, again, thank you so much for being with us. We're talking to Dr. Gabrielle Foreman. She is one of the editors of an important historical resource called The Colored Conventions Movement, Black Organizing in the 19th Century. And it's that very topic that we're trying to recognize in this hour, because we live in that rich legacy of those movements. I'm forgetting the number of conventions, but the doctor can inform us. But they happened over a roughly a 70-year period, and so terribly important for the battles, the struggle, the striving that we face today. Dr. Foreman, again, thank you. So we're talking about black folk getting together under the threat of physical harm and violence. And some black folk are free. Some are recently freed. Some are about to come out of an enslaved status. Often when social movements happen, they don't have the ability to be multi-class or multi-generational. And I wonder if you could start talking about how a group of diverse people among black communities came together to assert themselves, to call this country to honor its social contract, to honor notions of citizenship, and to have the space to respect and support one another.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think when we focus on Black communities, we get to talk about the multiplicity of jobs, of positions that we hold, the heterogeneity of our own community, the varied religious communities and organizational affiliations that often doesn't happen when we're in black-white dyads, right? And I'll call into our meeting space a couple of examples. One is conventions that are held across age, across generations. So people like John Mercer Langston, who later will become the founding dean of Howard's Law School, the acting president of Howard Law School, the first black congressperson from Virginia. He starts going to Ohio conventions when he is 19 and goes again to conventions with his brother Charles Langston, who is Langston Hughes's grandfather, for again over 5 decades. And so he's going with older people, right, with people who are had just come out of slavery. The first black person to vote in Ohio was a once enslaved person. So you're talking about a wide variety of experiences. I love this black-owned New Orleans Tribune record that talks about their 1865 convention. It's the first convention held in the South besides one convention in Baltimore that had been shut down by white violence. And it happens before the Civil War ends. I mean, talk about some bold folks. They're like, the war's not over, but we're going to hold our convention. And the New Orleans Tribune, black-owned, says that at the convention were seated side by side the rich and the poor, the literate and educated, the country laborer hardly released from bondage, distinguished only by the natural gifts of the mind, the rich landowner, the opulent tradesman, seconded motions offered by humble mechanics and freedmen, ministers of the gospel, officers and soldiers of the U.S. Army, men who handle the sword or the pen, merchants and clerks. All the classes of society were represented and united in common thought, the actual liberation from social and political bondage. That's what these newspaper accounts look like, right? They say it's the first political move ever made by the colored people of the state acting in a body, but they weren't talking about Louisiana. They were really talking about the whole of the South.
So people struggled probably against conditions that are even worse than what we've experienced today. It is unfair to you, but with the few minutes remaining, how can we be deliberate and intentional about the legacy, the models, the examples, the spirit of what color conventions leave us with?
Well, first I want to call the names of the co-editors of this volume, Jim Casey and Sarah Patterson, my the co-director of the Center for Black Digital Research, Shirley Moody Turner, and the scores and scores of leaders of this work that we're doing collectively in order to document Black organizing history. Please do visit us at coloredconventions.org, at douglasday.org. There are exhibits that accompany the new book. I should also say, if it's possible, I know infrastructure can also be a problem, we have playing cards that we would love to donate as part of the fundraising drive. Again, please call 202-588-9739 and, donate $8.09 or $89 a month, right, to honor the collective work and the programming that David and others are putting together that's so important to us. This is a movement about labor justice, educational justice, voting rights. It's about freedom from state-sanctioned violence. We have been asking this country to honor our rights, our full citizenship, our dignity for many, many years in an organized way. Petitions come out of this convention movement. It's extraordinarily important for us to know our history so we can know how long we've been struggling collectively and how long and concerted the effort to deny our rights has been. I think this is the way we strategically move forward, to recognize the erasures of our own history, the ways in which public memory has enforced a kind of exclusionary and scattered historical erasure, and allows us, when we come together to resurrect that history, to think about the strength of our ancestors who propel us forward in our work, in our organizing for justice and freedom and dignity.
Dr. Foreman, thank you so much. Guess what? Our hour is coming to an end. But I want to strategically re-emphasize something. We're all tied together. And I thank you for the future promise of your support with the historical cards. I'll work on that. So in the next fund drive, that will be available to people. Unfortunately, we can't get that together right now. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention again that people can really go to an exciting multi-generational resource that they can empower their communities now by going to Colored Conventions, put that together as one word, .org, and share with the marvelous book, The Colored Conventions Movement, Black Organizing in the 19th Century, from the University of North Carolina Press. Dr. Foreman, you've been very, very gracious. We did get a considerable amount of information in, and now we need you, the listener, to offer a considerable amount of support. We just have a few minutes remaining, but even after we go off the air, you can click that red donate button at WPFW-FM.org or call 202-588-9739, 202-588-9739, or 800-222-9739. Chris Bangor-Drowns, tell us more before we proceed to the news and other programming this afternoon.
Sure. Very briefly, again, we have a number of gifts to offer folks who want to donate and support the wonderful programming we have here. We have a number of different hoodies available in commemoration of WPFW's 44th anniversary, which is really incredible. Donate $89.30 or just $7.50 a month to grab that. And we have a series of audio collections of historic proportions from Malcolm X to the entire Black Panthers.
So
Black History Month.
Let's rattle these off. For a level of about $200, you can get hours of either women's history, Black Panther history, Malcolm X, or from the Pacifica archives, notable people throughout the ages, whether it's Noam Chomsky, Paul Robeson, Maya Angelou, as such. But we need you to make a contribution. You can do that in a monthly amount. We know that some people are pressed with their means, and we just want you to do that. The number to call is 202-588-9739, 202-588-9739. Cash App, you can do $WPFW, and on the internet, you can do WPFW-FM.org. There's a red donate button in the upper left corner. Chris, I know that you work hard with the news department. There's Monday Morning QB, and 5 minutes before each hour, the news is coming. But coming right at noontime is Don't Forget the Blues with Clarence the Bluesman Turner, Africa Now at 1 p.m. I believe there's a post-election focus on Uganda, and it's again because you, the listener, decide to support this station. It is no accident that we're entering our 45th year, and we celebrate with you. Won't you join us? Chris, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Oh, man, put me on the spot. Again, I just want to emphasize a monthly donation really helps us plan for the future, and it makes you a consistent part of this community. So let's continue to build this colored convention on the air. Call that number, 202-588-9739, out of area 800-222-9739, or online, WPFW-FM.org.
All right, and thank you to Eric in Nashville who's supporting programs. We still need $200 to $300 for this hour. Thank you, listeners. Hopefully we'll meet again next week. Take good care.
For WPFW Washington and WBAI New York, I'm Askia Mohammed. Here are some headlines. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced that he is lifting the statewide mask mandate and allowing businesses to reopen at 100% capacity starting next week. Abbott cited increased inoculation rates, even though less than 7% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. Abbott's decision will allow businesses to limit occupancy or require masks if they choose. Public health experts cautioned against Abbott's move, arguing that new cases and hospitalizations are still too high and that the order could lead to a spring break spike as people travel or go out to bars in large numbers. The pandemic has so far killed more than 42,500 Texans. The U.S. Capitol Police Force is bolstering security on Capitol Hill this week due to concerning information and intelligence related to March 4th, the date that some followers of QAnon conspiracy theories believe former President Donald Trump will return to power. Quote, the department is aware of concerning information and intelligence pertaining to March 4th and continues to work with all of our law enforcement partners, the federal law enforcement agency said in a statement last night, first reported by ABC News. Based on intelligence that we have, the department has taken immediate steps to enhance our security posture and staffing for a number of days to include March 4th. QAnon supporters believe Trump will be inaugurated on March 4th, which they call the true inauguration day. FBI Director Christopher Wray appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee Tuesday. He told lawmakers domestic terrorism has been metastasizing across the country and rebuked a far-right lie that is also supported by some Republican lawmakers that the rioters were fake Trump or left-wing protesters.
We have not to date seen any evidence of anarchist violent extremists or people subscribing to Antifa in connection with the 6th. Racially motivated violent extremism is the biggest chunk of our domestic terrorism portfolio, if you will, overall.
A Minnesota judge has ruled that only one member of George Floyd's grieving family will be able to attend the pending trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin, who is facing charges for killing Floyd, a death bystanders video captured. Judge Peter Cahill has ruled that different family members can rotate the position. However, only one will be allowed in the courtroom at a time. The same applies to Chauvin's family. Chauvin's trial begins Monday, March 8th. Chauvin is the only fired Minneapolis police officer who was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter in March. The three other officers involved in Floyd's May 2020 death have been charged with aiding and abetting and will be tried together in August. After more than 2 weeks, thousands of residents of Jackson, Mississippi are still without running water since the winter storm paralyzed the city in February. The storm caused long-term damage in several states in the South, including Louisiana and Texas, where millions were left without power and water for days. Mississippi continues to suffer from a storm-related water crisis, which caused 80 water breaks throughout Jackson. As of Sunday, 51 had been repaired. Currently in Washington, it's sunny and 52 degrees. In New York, it's sunny and 45. I'm Askia Mohammed. Thank you for listening to WPFW Washington and WBAI New York.
Come in. It's coming. Who's coming through? Y'all know who. And you're tuned to WPFW at 89.3.